Have you ever been left without an explanation and found yourself replaying everything in your mind, trying to understand what happened? The connection felt real, the conversations meant something, and then suddenly there was nothing. No closure, no clear reason, just silence where there used to be presence. This kind of experience can feel deeply confusing because humans naturally look for meaning in everything, especially relationships. When something ends without explanation, it creates a gap, and the mind tries to fill that gap with questions. Was it something I said? Did I miss a sign? Did they ever care in the first place? The absence of answers often becomes more painful than the ending itself. One of the main reasons people leave without explanation is avoidance. Some people are not comfortable with difficult conversations. They do not know how to express their feelings clearly, or they fear confrontation. So instead of explaining why they are leaving, they choose the easier path for themselves, which is to disappear. This does not mean it is right, but it often feels simpler to them than facing emotional discomfort. Another reason is emotional immaturity. Communication requires a certain level of self-awareness and responsibility. Being able to say what you feel, why you feel it, and what you need takes effort and clarity. Not everyone has developed that ability. So when their feelings change, or when they lose interest, they do not explain it, because they cannot fully understand it themselves. Sometimes people leave without explanation because they have already emotionally checked out long before they physically left. By the time they distance themselves, they have processed their decision internally. They may feel like there is nothing left to say because in their mind, the relationship has already ended. This creates a situation where one person is still present and invested while the other has already moved on silently. Fear also plays a big role. Some people worry about how their honesty will be received. They may not want to hurt you, or they may want to avoid being seen as the bad person. So instead of being direct, they disappear, thinking it will be less painful. In reality, this often causes more confusion because the lack of clarity leaves you questioning everything. There are also cases where people leave because they were never fully invested in the same way you were. From the beginning, their level of interest may have been different, but it was not obvious at the time. When their attention shifts or when something else becomes a priority, they step away without feeling the need to explain. This can feel unfair, especially if you were emotionally involved, but it reflects a difference in perspective rather than a sudden change. Another factor is the way people handle guilt. Some individuals struggle with acknowledging that they have hurt someone. Leaving without explanation allows them to avoid facing that guilt directly. They do not have to see your reaction, hear your questions, or process your emotions. This avoidance protects them in the short term, but leaves the other person without closure. In some situations, people leave because they are dealing with their own internal struggles. It could be stress, personal issues, or emotional confusion. Instead of communicating what they are going through, they withdraw completely. This does not always mean the connection was not real, but it does mean they chose to handle their situation in a way that excluded you. The difficulty with all of this is that when someone leaves without explanation, you are left to create your own version of the story. The mind searches for patterns and reasons, and sometimes it creates answers that are harsher than reality. You might blame yourself or assume the worst because there is nothing concrete to hold on to. But the truth is, their decision to leave without explaining says more about them than it does about you. It reflects their communication style, their emotional capacity, and how they handle discomfort. It does not define your value or your ability to form meaningful connections. It is also important to understand that closure does not always come from the other person. Many people wait for an explanation, thinking it will bring peace. But even when explanations are given, they are not always satisfying or complete. Real closure often comes from accepting what happened without needing every detail. This acceptance is not about ignoring your feelings. It is about recognizing that not every situation will make perfect sense, and that is part of life. You can acknowledge that something mattered to you while also accepting that the other person chose to leave in a way that did not provide clarity. There is also a lesson in patterns. If you notice this happening more than once, it can be helpful to reflect on the early stages of those connections. Were there signs of inconsistency? Did communication feel clear, or was it uncertain from the beginning? Sometimes the ending reflects patterns that were present all along, but not fully recognized at the time. This does not mean blaming yourself. It means becoming more aware of what you are engaging with. so that you can make more intentional choices moving forward. Awareness gives you the ability to notice differences in effort, communication, and emotional presence earlier on. At the same time, it is important not to become overly guarded. Not everyone will leave without explanation. There are people who communicate clearly, who respect your feelings, and who handle endings with honesty. The goal is not to expect the worst, but to recognize when something feels off and respond to it instead of ignoring it. Being left without explanation can make you question your judgment, but it can also strengthen your understanding of what you need in a relationship. You begin to value clarity, consistency, and communication more than before. You become less willing to accept uncertainty as something normal. Over time, you also learn that someone who cannot communicate their exit would likely struggle to communicate within the relationship as well. In that sense, their silence becomes an answer. Even if it is not the one you wanted, it shows you the limits of what they could offer, not just at the end, but throughout the connection. And while that realization can be difficult, it also creates clarity about what you deserve going forward. At the end of the day, not everyone will give you the explanation you hope for. Some people will leave quietly without closing the chapter in a clear way. But that does not mean you are stuck in that unfinished space forever. You have the ability to close it yourself by choosing how much meaning you give to their absence. Because sometimes the lack of explanation is the explanation. It tells you that they were not able or willing to meet you with the level of honesty and clarity that you needed. And once you understand that, you can begin to move forward. Not with all the answers, but with enough understanding to let go and make space for something healthier in the future.